Her guards aimed at him, their long silver weapons gleaming under the harsh lights of the throne hall. Captain Elias Ward stood alone, his hands raised slightly, not in surrender, but in a gesture that spoke of calm confidence. Every instinct told him to duck, to run, to plead. But Elias had faced impossible odds before, and he knew running would only make things worse. Across the hall, the Queen of Kareth, a towering figure with shimmering blue scales and eyes like molten gold, watched him silently. Her face was cold, unyielding, yet there was something deeper, a trace of curiosity hidden beneath layers of suspicion. Elias could feel her gaze, sharp and penetrating, as if she were trying to see straight into his mind. The throne hall was vast and crystalline, the walls reflecting every movement like mirrors made of ice. The air buzzed with energy from the guards' weapons, and the distant hum of the palace machinery added a sense of tension that pressed down on every person present. Elias knew that one wrong move, one flicker of fear could cost him his life. And yet, despite the danger, he did not flinch. "Your kind spreads too far," the Queen's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "You take what is not yours. You destroy what you cannot understand. Why should I not end you now?" Elias took a slow breath. His translator flickered to life at his throat, converting his words into the Queen's language. "Because I did not come here to destroy. I came to understand. And if you let me, I can help you understand us too." The Queen's expression hardened. She stepped forward, her presence filling the hall, and the guards tightened their grips on their weapons. She towered over Elias, and for a moment he wondered if sheer will alone could crush him where he stood. But then the great doors at the far end of the hall burst open with a deafening crash. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as two small figures stumbled in. The Queen's daughters, twin younglings who had been presumed safe in another city, ran into the room. Their scales were still soft, their wings unformed, but their eyes were wide with fear. They froze when they saw the guards' weapons, and then, with an almost human courage, they ran straight to Elias. He bent down quickly, gathering them into his arms, shielding them as best he could. The entire hall went silent. Even the guards seemed unsure of what to do. The Queen lifted her hand, a signal for attack, then froze as her gaze fell on her children. She took a step forward, then another, until she was standing before the human who held her daughters. Her golden eyes searched his face, trying to find the threat she had expected, and finding none. Elias kept his voice steady. "I found them trapped under the rubble. I could not leave them." His words, simple and unassuming, carried a weight that the Queen could not ignore. It was not the voice of a conqueror or a liar. It was the voice of someone who had acted out of care, out of a desire to save rather than to dominate. The Queen's lips parted slightly, a flicker of something like wonder passing over her face. She lowered her weapon slowly, and for the first time, the hall felt less like a place of execution and more like a crossroads. The guards, trained to obey without question, hesitated. Elias could see the conflict in their movements. He placed the younglings gently on the floor. They clung to his legs, their tiny hands gripping his pants as if afraid he might vanish. The Queen's daughters had never seen a human like him. They had only been told stories of monsters from the stars, creatures that would burn worlds and enslave entire populations. And yet here he was, risking his life to save them. The Queen stepped back slightly, her tail curling around her feet. "Why?" she asked, her voice quieter now, tinged with something that sounded almost like curiosity. "Because it is what we do," Elias replied simply. "We help those in need, not for power, not for glory, because it is right." The Queen's eyes lingered on him. No one had ever spoken to her like this. She was used to obedience, fear, and respect, but never honesty that carried the weight of compassion. The younglings looked up at their mother, then back at Elias, their trust clear and unspoken. Outside, the rumble of warships in orbit reminded Elias that time was not on their side. Humanity's fleet had arrived in the system, prepared to strike if negotiations failed. The Queen's kingdom was vast, and she could destroy the fleet with ease. But she did not. Instead, she simply watched, measuring, calculating, trying to understand this strange human who had changed the rules of the game simply by showing courage. One of the guards stepped forward, his weapon still raised. "She could kill him," he said quietly to the Queen. "Yes," she replied, her eyes never leaving Elias. "But should I?" Elias did not move. He kept his hands visible, his posture calm. He could feel the tension in the room. the uncertainty of a species that had never seen humanity act without calculation. He could see the battle playing out in the Queen's mind, and he knew that one word, one gesture could tip the scales. He smiled faintly. "I only want peace." The Queen's gaze softened just a fraction as she looked at her children. They were safe for now, and that was because of him. The thought unsettled her in ways she had never experienced. She had ruled with fear, with power, with control, and yet here was a being who had no claim to her throne, no allegiance to her people, who had acted purely out of care. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then the Queen spoke, her voice firm but not cold. "You will be held in custody until I decide your fate." Elias nodded. He had expected this. He was not naive. He knew that custody could mean imprisonment or worse. But he also knew that he had bought a moment of understanding, a chance to prove that humanity could act differently than they expected. The younglings sat down beside him, their small hands resting on his legs. They looked at him with wide, trusting eyes, and for the first time Elias felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this small act of kindness could ripple outwards, changing the course of a war that had seemed inevitable. As the guards led him away, Elias glanced back at the Queen. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something new in her eyes. Respect, perhaps, or curiosity. It was impossible to tell, but it was enough. Outside, the warships waited, silent and threatening. Humanity had come ready for battle, but Elias had managed to create a pause, a moment of hesitation in a conflict that could have ended in fire. The Queen's decision now would shape the future of both species, and Elias could only hope that she would choose wisely. He was led to a holding chamber, simple but secure. He was alone for a moment, and then the younglings joined him, sitting quietly. Elias looked at them and smiled. "You're safe now," he said softly. "I won't let anything happen to you." They leaned against him, trusting, and for a moment the weight of the galaxy's conflict seemed to lift. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Humanity had shown its strength not in weapons or firepower, but in courage, compassion, and the willingness to act when others would hesitate. And far above them, in the throne hall, the Queen watched her children. Her mind was racing, filled with questions she had never asked before. Could she trust this human? Could she trust herself to make the right decision? The answers were unclear, but one thing was certain. The future had shifted in ways she had not anticipated. Elias leaned back against the wall, the youngling still by his side. He closed his eyes briefly, allowing himself a moment of calm. The war was far from over, but for the first time he felt that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to change the course of history. A chance for understanding between two very different species. A chance to show that humanity was capable of more than conquest, that it was capable of compassion, courage, and hope. And as the stars of Kareth Prime shone through the crystalline walls of the holding chamber, Elias knew that the next steps would be the hardest yet. But he was ready because this was what it meant to be human. Elias sat in the holding chamber with the Queen's daughters, their small bodies pressed close to his side. Outside, the palace was alive with whispers and the low hum of activity. Guards patrolled the halls with extra caution, and the Queen's advisors debated in hurried tones about what should be done with the human who had dared enter the throne hall alone and save her children. For Elias, the waiting was the hardest part. He had faced deadly firefights, hostile worlds, and alien species with teeth and claws sharper than any Earth weapon. But the tension of uncertainty gnawed at him more than any battle ever had. Every sound in the hall could signal an attack. Every moment of silence could be his last. The younglings looked up at him, their eyes wide and searching. One of them, a girl with silver-blue scales that shimmered in the dim light, whispered, "Will she hurt you?" Elias shook his head slowly. "I don't think she will. Not now. She is thinking." The other twin, a boy with darker scales, pressed closer to Elias. "Why did you save us?" he asked, his voice trembling. Elias smiled gently, brushing a stray scale from the girl's forehead. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because you were in danger. Because sometimes people should help each other no matter what." They fell silent, and for a moment the room was calm. Outside, however, the storm was building. Word of Elias' actions had reached the Queen's advisors and military leaders, some of whom were furious. One of the highest-ranking warlords, a massive Kathiri with scales the color of molten iron, argued that Elias must be executed immediately. Humanity had attacked many colonies, taken lands, and left destruction in their wake. How could one human, no matter how brave, be trusted? But the queen, sitting alone in her private chamber above the throne hall, thought differently. She had watched Elias in action, seen him protect her daughters at great personal risk. She had observed the way he had spoken to her, calm and unyielding, with a strength that came not from power or weaponry, but from courage and conviction. Her people respected strength. They obeyed power. But Elias had something else, a humanity she could not fully define. She called for a private meeting. Elias was escorted under heavy guard to her chamber. The twins stayed behind, tucked safely into the corner of the holding chamber with other attendants. Elias was not restrained in the queen's presence, though the guards remained nearby, tense and alert. The queen regarded him silently as he entered. He did not bow, but he did not stand arrogantly either. He waited, meeting her golden gaze without fear. "Captain Elias Ward," she said finally, her voice measured, "you have saved my daughters. For that you are alive. But your presence here is still dangerous. Your fleet is in orbit, ready to strike. My people may never forgive you for this." Elias nodded. "I understand. I do not expect forgiveness. I only want peace." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Peace, a strange word for your kind. I have heard it before, but you do not act like others who claim it. You risked your life to protect those who were not yours. You do not seek power. Why?" Elias took a deep breath. "Because that is what humans can do. We make mistakes, yes. We fight wars, yes. But we also fight to protect, to build, to save. I do not want war with your people. I want understanding." The queen was silent for a long moment. Outside, the hum of the palace continued, a quiet reminder that time was running out. Her advisors were growing impatient. The warlord's threats echoed in her mind, and yet she could not ignore the truth before her eyes. Elias had risked himself for her children, and that act had shown a kind of bravery and integrity she had rarely seen in anyone, alien or human. "You speak boldly," she said at last, "but can you prove it? Can you act beyond words?" Elias did not hesitate. "Yes, I can." The queen's brow furrowed. "Then you will act now. Your actions will determine whether your life continues." Before Elias could respond, alarms sounded across the palace. The warlord had acted. Without the queen's consent, a fleet of Kathiri strike vessels entered orbit, targeting the human fleet. The first shots had already been fired. Explosions lit up the sky above the city, and panic rippled through the palace. Elias stood quickly. "We have to stop this," he said, his voice firm. "If the Queen's people destroy my fleet, it will start a war that no one can control. We can still prevent it." The Queen's eyes widened. "How?" Elias pointed to the communication terminals. "I know how to disable the targeting systems temporarily. We can prevent the attack, give you control, and stop the warlord before he escalates further." She hesitated. Trusting a human to intervene in her fleet's controls was dangerous. She had been trained to command with precision and fear, never to rely on the mercy or skill of outsiders, but something inside her told her this human was different. She nodded. "Do it." Elias moved swiftly to the terminals. He worked with her guards, translating commands and overriding security protocols. Every second felt like an eternity. Outside, ships maneuvered, weapons charged. The fate of countless lives balanced on a knife's edge. Finally, with a series of deft maneuvers, Elias and the Queen's trusted guards managed to disable the rogue fleet's weapons. The warlord's attack was halted before it could reach the human ships. Silence returned, but it was a tense, fragile silence. The Queen turned to Elias. "You have done what many thought impossible," she said softly. "You have saved lives that even I could not protect." Elias shook his head. "We did it together. Your people followed instructions and I only guided. It was teamwork, not heroism." Her golden eyes softened. "Perhaps, but heroism is sometimes just the courage to do what is right, even when fear is all around you. You have that courage, human." For the first time, the Queen smiled faintly but genuinely. She turned to her daughters, who had watched the entire ordeal from a safe distance. "Look at him," she said. "This is a human. He has shown you strength, courage, and compassion. Remember him." The younglings' eyes shone with admiration. They had seen their mother hesitate, seen her torn between duty and fear, and they had seen Elias act selflessly, risking everything to save them. It was a lesson that no lesson in the palace could have taught. The queen summoned the warlord. He had been preparing to resist her commands, but Elias's actions had changed everything. The queen addressed him in a firm, commanding voice. "You will stand down and face judgment for your actions. The war ends now." The warlord's anger flared, but he could not ignore the evidence. His weapons had been neutralized. His fleet was powerless. Slowly, he knelt before the queen. "As you command," he said, voice tight with fury. The queen turned to Elias. "Your presence has changed my people's path. You have shown us a new way, and for that you will be released." Elias exhaled, relief flooding him. He had known this could happen, but the risk had been immense. The tension in the chamber lifted slightly, replaced with the fragile calm of hard-earned peace. The younglings ran to him, hugging his legs. "You saved us!" the girl exclaimed. Elias smiled and knelt to their level. "Yes, and I will always try to protect you. That is what humans do." Outside the palace, the human fleet withdrew from orbit, not in defeat, but in mutual respect. The queen had chosen peace, and in doing so, she had rewritten the future of her empire and humanity's relationship with it. Stories of the human who saved the queen's daughters began to spread across both species, not as tales of war, but as legends of courage, compassion, and hope. The queen looked at Elias one last time. "Perhaps there is more to your kind than I ever imagined," she said. "Perhaps you are capable of teaching even us something about courage and honor." Elias nodded. "That is all we ever hope to do." As the stars of Kareth Prime glimmered in the sky, Elias and his crew prepared to leave the system. Behind him, the palace stood tall, a symbol of a species learning to embrace trust and understanding over fear and destruction. And in the hearts of the queen and her daughters, the lesson of humanity's courage would remain forever. The galaxy had not been conquered. It had been changed. And for Elias, the captain who had risked everything, that was victory enough, because being human meant more than surviving. It meant protecting, inspiring, and showing the courage to act rightly, even when the universe seemed determined to oppose you. And with that, the human ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a new legend, a new understanding, and a fragile, hard-won peace that would echo across the stars.